Alright, in this tutorial we're going to be building a full animated subscribe button for YouTube, commonly known as a lower third that you can use in any video project. We're going to be animating the entire video right directly inside of Photoshop. So follow along. Now, in order to get started for this project, we need to create a preset document here in Photoshop. So we're going to go ahead and click the Create New, and we're going to come over here to the Video Presets. You can see there's a Film and Video tab here. And then on these presets here, there's several options. We're going to be using the HD TV. This is 1920 by 1080. That's full HD resolution. So let's go ahead and select that for our document. We're going to hit Create. Now what you'll notice here is when you create this document and you turn on your grids, that's Command semicolon, you'll see all these lines. And what these lines are set up for is to show you what's known as the video safe areas. So because different screens will display videos in slightly different resolutions or some portions may be slightly cut off, you need to place your important graphics inside the safe viewing area. So you want to make sure that your text elements are also inside of these safe areas so that it's not, it doesn't get cut off and it's not legible anymore. So that's what these guides are set up for. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of paste in a graphic here in the back, and then we're going to animate in our lower third with a little subscribe animation with a little button click, and do all of the animation for our video right inside of Photoshop. And we're going to export this as an actual MOV file as well. So let's go ahead and place our graphics. Now you can see here when I say File, Place, I'm going to choose Place Embedded. And I have 4 graphics set up. I'm just going to quickly show you them. So here's my background. We're going to pretend this is like the intro for a yoga studio or something like that. And then I'm going to have this little click button, which is going to be my hand. And then I'm going to have this point button, which doesn't have the little click symbols along the outside of the finger. And then I'm going to have this little subscribe button. And then we're going to do a few effects inside of Photoshop to kind of create a little bit of an animation with all of these assets. So we need to import all of these one by one into our document. So I'll go ahead and just place all of these in here really quickly. And so there's going to be our outer document. I'll resize this here in a minute to fit my video frame. And let's go ahead and place the other ones. So we'll place the click, hitting Command Return to just place these quickly. I like to always place them embedded. You can always place linked. And one more. Let's see, the subscribe button. Okay, so we have all of our assets and they're on these various layers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Command with my point tool and click, and that selects the background layer. I'm going to resize that. So Command T for free transform, and I'm just going to kind of scale this up a little bit to make it so that it fills the entire video area. Something right along there works pretty good. I'm going to bump it up just a little bit so I can get most of the entire hand in there. That looks okay, and hit OK. Perfect. So there's my background layer in place. And now I'm going to grab my subscribe button, and I'm going to move this down here a bit. We'll grab these 2 pointer hands and kind of move them over here because we're not going to quite use them yet. In fact, I'm going to place them up here maybe a little bit. Okay, so now we need to design out our lower third. So the idea here is that we're going to sort of slide in this little thing from the left. It's going to have maybe the name of our YouTube channel or the, a person we're interviewing on live TV like the newscasts do. And that's going to slide in here from the left to house the name. So we need to design that asset. So the way I envision this working is we're first going to slide in the name, and then the little subscribe button will slide out just right after that in sequence as well. So let's go ahead and turn off the layers that we don't need. And then let's build up this little element. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool here, and I'm just going to draw out a simple rectangle from left to right. So I'm going to design this right inside of the safe area, kind of maybe something like that. And then I'm going to take my white arrow tool. So I'm going to click the black arrow tool, hold down, come to the direct selection tool. And I'm going to click on this top right anchor point right here. So it's the only one selected. And with the shift key held down, I'm going to nudge to the left with my arrows. And it's going to say, hey, this is going to turn this from a shape into a path. And I'll say, sure, that's fine. So I'm going to hit yes. And then I hold down shift, and I'm just clicking left a little bit because I just want that to kind of have a little bit of an angle to it. There's not like a real right or wrong here. Maybe something like that will work fine for me for this little sample. Okay, so I've got that in place. Now let's go ahead and add a drop shadow. So I'm going to say Filter, Drop Shadow. And I want this drop shadow to not have any blurriness. You can see that it's fairly blurry down here by default. So I want to take my drop shadow and I'm going to set my angle kind of up here to the top leftish. And I'll zoom in here so you can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to set my size is fine. Distance I'm going to increase, and I'm going to take size and I'm going to decrease that. That way I get a nice hard edge here, you can see. And I'm going to move this out of the way so we can see this a little bit. So I increase my distance, and I'm going to play along with this angle. All I'm really trying to do here is match. So this side over here has roughly the same amount of pixels as this does down here. And that's pretty close right there. So that's looking okay for me. Now I'm going to take the opacity and I'm going to back that down a little bit so that it's not all the way black. And I'm going to change the color. So instead of having this black, I'm probably just going to pick a color out of my image. So I'm just going to pick one of these reds out of the shirt here to kind of match that a little bit. It matches with the pink. And now I can play around with opacity here to get that just how I want. So we'll leave that sort of like that. Works okay for me. Okay, next let's go ahead and add some type inside of this element. So we'll grab the text tool, and I don't want to hover inside of this and click, otherwise it will try to add the type inside of the shape. So I'm actually going to click up here and type, and we'll just call this is going to be our YOLO Yoga. So you only live once, Yoga Studio, and we'll grab this, bring it down here, free transform, Command T, and I'm just going to scale this up to kind of some size that sort of makes me happy. So something maybe right around in there. Again, I want to make sure this text gets inside of these safe lines, so it's going to be legible, and nudge this around a bit. Okay, that looks okay. I'm going to modify the color as well. So I'm going to grab, whoops, that's not what I want to grab. Let's cancel that. I'm going to grab this text, double click. We'll come in here to the color. Just like I did before, I'm going to pull out a red and hit OK. So this is just going to be kind of a red feature like so. So there is our title. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this up slightly. I'm going to hold down Command on my, or not Command, sorry, Option on my keyboard, and click and drag another copy of this straight below. So that just basically duplicates the layer, holding down Option and clicking and dragging. Get T for my type tool on the keyboard, double click this, and I'm going to change this to the instructor name. So I'll say something like with Anna, let's see, this lady looks like an Anna, I can't think of the last name. Frederick. Okay, so then we're going to free transform that down, and we're going to scale this way down. We're going to place this right over here. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm just placing this type up in here. Command return, and I'm going to change the text color here. So this text on the bottom, we will highlight, whoops, wrong one. Let's grab this one right here, and I'll make that text maybe black or something. Okay, close enough. So there we have our title. We have a little bit of the information about who's in the picture in the lower thirds. So this little element is sort of going to animate in from the left and the right. And then our subscribe button will animate in from the left to the right over in this area that's currently blank. And then we'll have our little animation where we have a little click. So now we need to animate all of this stuff. So what we want to do to make this easier on ourselves, Photoshop has a built-in timeline, and they have two modes. One's frame-by-frame animation, and the other one is timeline or keyframe-based animation. So we want to use the latter. Now, there's several things that are animatable inside of Photoshop, but we're not going to be animating things in a super fancy way. Like, we don't need to separate all these layers and slide them in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take everything that belongs to this design here, and I'm going to group all of those layers into a folder, and I'll just call this my lower third. And I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to say convert to smart object. What that's going to allow me to do is just animate that whole entire unit as a single unit. So I'm going to say convert to smart object. So now you can see I can toggle that on and off, and everything looks fine. Now what we want to do is start our animation process. So again, this is going to come out, then our subscribe button, then we're going to have our click animation. So the way I like to work is place everything inside of Photoshop in their final positions. So where they would be animated to, and then we're going to sort of move them backwards and animate in reverse. So the next thing I need to do basically is get my subscribe button. So I'm going to turn that layer on. And let's, make sure we grab the right layer. We'll grab our subscribe layer. Oops, I keep clicking on the wrong one. There we go. And we'll pull that over here. Now, right now, this subscribe button seems a little bit large to me, so I'm going to free transform that and just scale it down. Maybe we just want it to slide in maybe somewhere right along there. Hit OK. And then we'll turn on our little hand clicks as well. So I'm going to turn on the pointer and the click. Right now, these are not the same. These are not the same size, so I need to scale them so they roughly are the same size. So I'll grab this one, free transform, and I'm going to scale it down. And I'll place it on top of this guy. There we go. That looks like those two match right there. Hit OK. And now I can grab both of those layers. That is my point layer and my click layer, which that one's spelled wrong. I just noticed. Should be point and click. So I'm going to highlight both of those layers, holding Shift V on the keyboard for select, click and drag this down here. Command T to free transform both of those at the same time and scale this down to something that makes me happy. So again, there's not really a right or wrong here. I'll just maybe scale it down about like that and hit OK, Command Return, and pull both of these layers up above my subscribe button so they do something like that. So the button will animate out, then the hand, and the way it's going to kind of work is it will sort of look like this, right? Where the first thing that pop up will be the pointer, and then we'll do the click and to have a little click effect that kind of looks like that. So that's going to be the way those things work. Okay, so now let's begin our animation. Everything is designed up and it's all in the final resting position. So we're going to come up here to our window and we need to turn on the animation panel. And that's just down here and it's called, it's used to be called animation. What's it called these days? I think it's called timeline. There it is. So it's down here called timeline. So we're going to turn on the timeline panel and you can see here's the two modes I spoke of earlier. One is video timeline and the other one is a frame timeline. Now this user interface down here is atrocious. It's completely confusing. So what you have to do is you have to click this button, choose which one you want, and then you actually click this button to create the timeline. Again, I don't know who designed that. Obviously not me, right? So we're gonna click the button on the video timeline. So click the button and you can see now we actually have a timeline. So let's pull this up and I'm gonna scale down the zoom or our viewport, if you will, here. So I'll scale the canvas down so we can see all of our layers and our animation up here. So the way that this works is inside of Photoshop, we have what are known as keyframes. This is a similar concept that works in really all animation softwares, whether you're working in Flash or whether you're working in Premiere or After Effects, anything that can create composite animations. A common term is a keyframe. So what we want to do is we essentially want to set two keyframes. We want to set a keyframe for our starting position and we want to set a keyframe for our ending position. And then Photoshop will automatically animate or interpolate the difference between those two keyframes for us. We don't have to do that work. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Now to create keyframes inside of Photoshop, you just need to grab the playhead here and move the playhead to a position and then move your objects around. So for example, notice that each of these layers in my timeline correspond with the layers in my actual Photoshop layers panel. So what we're going to do here is start out with the YOLO name here. So let's go ahead and grab this one. This one, of course, is the lower third layer. You can see if I fly open this menu, I get the available options that I can animate. So I can animate the transform, I can animate opacity, and I can animate style. So all of those things are animatable. Style meaning everything that's inside of the FX menu, I can animate all those properties. Like drop shadow, I could animate that and all sorts of things. So we're going to be animating this one first. So what I'll do here, just to make this easy on myself, is I'm going to place a marker where I want this thing to end. So I'm going to click over here, make sure I have your rulers turned on. Command R will turn those rulers on and off. Grab a guide and pull the guide out to the sort of the ending position. So right there is where that thing ends, and I already know it's roughly on the bottom of that line. So what I can do is I can grab that lower third layer, and I'm going to move out to, let's see, up here in my timeline. I should explain this really quickly. Notice how it says 10F, 20F, and then 1. What that means is 10 frames, 20 frames, 1 second. I think this project is set to, I actually don't even know, I didn't even pay attention. It's probably set to 29 frames per second, it looks like. or maybe it's set to 24 frames per second. So in other words, this point, if I move my playhead to 1, this entire area is 1 second of duration in the video file. So however long you want to animate this is up to you, but a lower third should animate in fairly quickly. You don't want this to take 6, 7, 8 seconds where it slowly moves in. You want it to kind of zoom, 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 and everything happens really within a second or two. Okay, so I've moved my playhead out here to 1 second. And what I need to do is I need to turn on the keyframing. And that's what these little teeny tiny stopwatches are for next to these properties. So if you click a stopwatch, you'll notice that Photoshop adds a little diamond symbol over here in your timeline. That tells you that that's a keyframe. Okay, so I've added a keyframe right there, which basically says, here's a position I want Photoshop to remember. Then I'm gonna move my playhead back to frame 0. And again, I'm sort of animating in reverse. And then I'm gonna grab this layer here, make sure you have your lower third layer selected. Select the layer, hold down Shift, and then click and drag it off screen. And let go. And you notice as soon as I let go, Photoshop adds another keyframe. So basically I'm telling Photoshop, here's the starting position, this is the ending position. And now if I just scrub the playhead, meaning I click and drag through the timeline, you can see that element is going to animate in from left to right. Okay, so I've animated that in and that looks great. So now let's animate in the subscribe button. So we're kind of the same process. So this one I want to finish just a little bit after this. So maybe I'll drag out to maybe right here and add a keyframe. Maybe we'll do it maybe just full 10 frames. So I'll grab the subscribe button layer and I'm going to turn on the stopwatch for it. So I need to fly this open. Turn on the stopwatch on the transform property. Same thing, Shift, click and drag it completely off screen over here as well. I skipped a step, sorry. I'm going to do Command Z. First I have to move the playhead. So I have to move the playhead back to 0. Then click and drag this guy back over here. Got ahead of myself there. And now you can see when I scrub the timeline, both of those elements are flying in. But you notice they kind of fly in at the same speed. So I need to adjust this a little bit. Now the other problem is I actually want my subscribe button to fly out underneath my YOLO yoga layer. So I'm actually going to take this layer, my subscribe button, and move it underneath. Whoops, I double clicked on accident. Move it underneath my lower third so it comes out underneath. There we go. And that should work. So now let's kind of mess around here with some of these properties and make sure we get this thing right. So we'll take our lower third, there's our subscribe button. It's underneath there. And notice how it's actually on top over here still. I think that's because I have a cache. I think it got saved that way. I think if we re-export this, it should fix itself. We'll see here in a second. This is a little render cache right up here. This little blue line means it's already been pre-rendered. So I think it's just rendering from cache, which is why it's still on top. So I actually don't know if there's a way to kind of reset that cache. But this should work. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is change the speed. So maybe you can see right now it's still kind of in lockstep with this guy. And I want it to go a little bit further back. So back here, I'm going to grab my subscribe button, get V. Even though I can't see it, I can hold down Shift and just move it a little more to the left. Now it's kind of scrubbed through there we go. So you can see now it starts to slide out. So that slides out and it's starting to slide out and then it goes out all the way. So that looks fine like that to me. So it kind of peaks out slowly and then goes the rest of the way. Perfect. Now the next one, as soon as it hits its ending position, I want my cursor to move up. So my hand without the clicks is going to move from the bottom of the screen up, and then finally the little click will appear. So let's do that next. So up here on my click layer, that is the one, let's see, which is on top. I want my click to be on top of the point. Let's just double check here. So there's the pointer and then the click, and that'll work great. Okay, so I'm going to hide my click layer all the way up to this point. So let's turn on the click and we're going to do the opacity, and we're going to set the opacity. This is just kind of an easy way to do this. I'm going to set opacity to 0 on my click layer. So it's not even visible until this point. And the same thing down here, we're going to move this one down. So now I'm going to open up my pointer And again, this is the ending position. So I want this guy to maybe come out a few frames past down here. This is just kind of arbitrary, really. I'm just kind of moving out a little bit. And I'll add a keyframe here on my point layer. So I'm going to click the transform. And then I'm going to get this layer, make sure I'm on my point layer, and I'm going to click. I'm going to zoom out one more time so I can kind of move this down. So I'm going to click, hold down shift, and move straight down. Whoops, I did the same thing. Let's undo. I need to move my playhead back a few frames. So maybe this is guy, right when that hits, this will start to slide up. So I'll come to right here and I'll move him down to there. So you can see the sort of the sequence. These kind of slide out. As soon as that hits, this guy will slide up from the bottom. And then as soon as it hits its resting position on the click layer, I'm going to turn the opacity back up. So I'm going to come back up to the click layer. I'm going to set opacity and I'm going to turn that all the way back on, which is going to make that little click appear. So it's going to go like this. And you can see right now, right, it's animating between those two, and I really don't want that. So what I have to do is add one more keyframe here. So I'm going to set the opacity here back to 0, move my playhead forward just one frame, then set the opacity back to 100. Okay, so something like this where it slides up, hits in place, then all of a sudden it clicks through, and that's the end of my animation. So now let's preview the entire thing. Let's see how it looks. So we can now pull this up. I'm going to zoom in a click or two so you can now finally see this. And let's test it out. So we can come over here and click the play button. So that comes in, that comes out, and it clicks. So I'm going to watch this one more time, let it render all the way through. Okay. So there we go for our lower third. That looks like it's happening okay. And again, you can sort of customize all this and tweak this and animate and add more layers as you want. So the last thing we need to do in this tutorial is then render out this video without the background. Remember, this is a lower third, so it's going to be animated on the top of live video or something. So the background was just sort of to get us some reference of where we want to place our items. So what we need to do now is turn off the background layer so it's transparent. I'm going to turn off this background layer so we have a true transparent layer. And then I need to cut down my timeline. So by default, Photoshop, you can see, I think it created a 5-second intro animation, but I don't need that long, right? I'm only using 2 seconds. So right here, about maybe 2.5 seconds, I actually want to cut this video off. So I can come over here, and if you right click, you can see I can say trim, trim clip. There we go, trim to the end of the clip. Trim end of clip. So this is saying trim the end of the clip to wherever my playhead is. So I can click that button and you can see that moves that guy up, and we'll do that for each of these. Whoops. So we'll right click in here. Why is that happening there? Not sure why that's clicking again. There we go. Trim to end of clip. So you can do this clip by clip by clip, and you can also do the work area. So you can say set to the end of my work area, and that's going to basically take your work area, which is, it's kind of hard to see, but that's this little teeny tiny work area over here, to the end of the clip as well. So I'll just do this one by one for each of these. I'll select this one. We'll trim this one to the end of the clip. And we have 2 more here to go. Trim to the end. Right click, trim to the end of clip. So now our entire project is only 2.5 seconds, right? So now when I play this, when I export my video, it's not going to export 5 extra seconds of just things sitting there doing nothing. Okay, so right here in the little teeny tiny options, you click this, and this is where you have a few different options for working with the video timeline inside of Adobe Photoshop. We're not going to be looking into a lot of this, but really the only one we're going to be paying attention to is this one called Render Video. Notice you can move and trim, you can split your clips in half and put things on top of one another. Onion skin, there's a bunch of options in here. You can change the frame rate and video settings. But again, for this little tutorial, we're just going to click the Render Video. So this is going to pop up here in a second, and it will render out our video. And here you can choose your codec settings. So I'll just render this out here to my desktop, and I'm going to put it right inside of this subscribe folder. So we'll choose that, and I'll just call this the final render or something like that. And you can choose which codec. I can use H.264, high quality. Your document size is going to match. There's the frame rate earlier I mentioned, right, mine was set to 29.97 frames, which is one of the standards for a frame rate. And that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and click on render. This will take, depending on how your processor speed and computer, this may take a minute or it may be pretty quick. So mine's already done because it's only 2 seconds. Let's now hop over here to our file, and you can see there is our final render. There's the video with the lower third animated out and our little animation. So then I could take this and drop it inside of any other live action video, and the video would play in the background, and this would slide on top of that if we have our alpha channel set up in our video file. So that's how you can build out a animated subscribe button inside of Photoshop for your YouTube channel or anything else video work. You actually can import and insert audio as well. So if you have a video that has audio inside of it, Photoshop will actually recognize and play the audio and export that as well. Of course, this tutorial just covered the video, but audio is an option as well. So I hope you liked it. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, click my subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.